Hey everybody, this is Alley Cat.
And this is Gare Bear.
And you're watching What in the World? That's right, it's the second season and we're back.
A dinosaur story.
What?
I don't know, it's what I always think of when I hear we're back. It's like a word association thing.
Well, bad 90s movies aside, you know what else is back?
I don't know, there are a lot of things that are back. Which one are you thinking of?
The thing that's back and better than ever. The one that everyone's talking about. The one that this episode is about.
Oh, right.
Took you long enough.
Yeah, it's just because we talked about this episode a long time ago. In a galaxy far, far away.
All right, enough with the references. This episode is about Star Wars! It's back!
The newest film in the Star Wars franchise, The Force Awakens, brought back a lot of what we loved about the original trilogy, as well as some of its flaws.
But for any gripes we may have, there's never been a world quite so interesting in how it ended up manifesting itself.
What started as a movie that no one thought would succeed has turned into a multi-billion-dollar franchise that encompasses not only movies, but books, TV shows, and video games. And all of those things end up adding to the canon of the Star Wars universe.
It's a lot of territory if you want to cover everything.
Yeah, but conveniently for us, The Force Awakens ended up striking a lot of that from the canon.
Yeah, so because of that, and because we want to keep things short and simple, we're mostly going to be just focusing on the movies for this episode. And we've narrowed it down to three
topics for exploration. Here's the first.
We did it! Humans have been exploring space and have discovered no intelligent life whatsoever.
Yeah, because that sounds like a lot of fun, doesn't it?
Aliens, whether humanoid or plant-like or animal-related, usually play an important part in fictional worlds involving outer space, especially those that have other galaxies in them, other than the Milky Way, and Star Wars is no exception. In the movies, the aliens are varied and not always humanoid. They all coexist with humans, but it's also shown that the aliens also have their own cultural customs, languages, and ways of life. Some work with or deal with humans, while others are complete strangers to humankind. They're treated as another culture rather than some strange and wondrous species to human travelers, which also allows viewers a gateway to imagining what else could be out there.
Aliens also serve a variety of purposes when it comes to the world's narrative. The cantina scenes from both the original trilogy and The Force Awakens show off the alien species, and are always plot relevant. What would the original trilogy be without Chewbacca working with Han Solo? Or without Jabba the Hutt as a villain? Or what if Yoda was yet another Obi-Wan figure? Or how about Jar Jar Binks and the Gungans in the prequel trilogy? Okay, so maybe they would have been better without that last one. Unless...
We do not have time for Darth Jar Jar!
Okay, fine. Moving on.
The point is that all of these characters serve purposes in the narrative, and allows us to look into a truly different world rather than the one that's basically just humans but in space. It also makes it so that we get the sense that the aliens of the world are doing more than just being props.
Sometimes. While Star Wars does a lot of good with its aliens, it's far from perfect. Even though the aliens do clearly have personalities and complexities, they're rarely utilized fully. More often than not, they end up expendable, or else defined only by their species. As they were introducing all of the X-Wing pilots in the climax of The Force Awakens, and here I mean all of the pilots that were flying with Poe at the very end, I kept guessing which pilots were gonna live and which ones were gonna die. The one alien in the crew, very obvious death, and I'm pretty darn sure that the alien died first.
The point being, if you are both a minor character in Star Wars and an alien, you are immediately expendable in any battle, especially when it comes down to you surviving versus the humans.
It also means that you're defined by your species. You are the Wookiee, or the Jawa, or the Gungan.
Mr. Dark Lord Jar Jar Binks!
The human is a term that you do not hear in the Star Wars universe, which makes you think that humans are the default population. But that's kind of weird when you consider how many aliens there are and how numerous they obviously are.
But all that said, the aliens in Star Wars do have a distinct presence in the universe and really spark the imagination in terms of what really could be out there. It works well for the narrative, and it inspires its fans.
The future!
Or in the case of Star Wars, the past!
Which apparently has much better technology than the here and the now.
In any case, the technology in Star Wars is just as varied as the aliens, and varies depending on the culture you find it in.
Overall, technology for the galaxy is pretty darn cool. From blasters to lightsabers to the Death Star, there are a whole bunch of ways to kill someone.
Or communicate. Palm-sized communication holograms are a thing in Star Wars too, as are large holographic battle plans and 3D holographic Wookiee chess, not to mention really dangerous flying laser training balls. Also droids.
Which I guess are tech primarily, but can almost be like aliens in their communication, movement, and personality traits.
In general, Star Wars has some pretty cool technology that it uses effectively. The lightsaber is an iconic piece of weaponry in our culture today, and the sheer mass and intricacy of the Death Star is definitely something thought out, to a certain extent.
Despite its awe factor, the Death Star also doesn't have much in the way of mechanical explanation other than big, dangerous, and has a port that will blow up the whole thing if you hit it just right.
That, and how exactly does a lightsaber work? I mean, we see what it does, but how? And how much do people really know about the tech in Star Wars?
And is it really possible for Rey to know everything that she seems to know about ships,
Except when she doesn't.
having lived her whole life only on Jakku? It's questions like these that don't really need to be answered for the plot to move along, but they do need to be answered if you want your world to feel fully fleshed out.
Nonetheless, tech in Star Wars is easy enough to grasp for audiences and is useful in the narrative, whether it's for fighting in times of war, playing or training in times of peace, or, most consistently and importantly, getting around. We talked a bit about geography last season, but how you actually manage to get from A to B in the world and what it takes to actually do it is something that we think actually deserves its own topic.
And we really like Star Wars for this, because there is a lot of traveling going on, even if some of it takes place off screen. We touched on the variety of ships in our technology section, but in a way they also belong here because they determine where and how fast you can travel. That should also affect culture, which Star Wars shows pretty well. Not all ships have the capacity to go to light speed. Not all planets are equipped with speeders or pods.
And if you don't have a ship, you're not going off planet. The moment that Rey sees another planet covered with greenery instead of with sand is actually really cool and really eye-opening. In that case, Rey's capacity for travel directly influenced her way of looking at the world.
Whether you're swimming, flying, or just walking in the Star Wars universe, your modes of travel and travel time are affected both by your tech and by your geography. Most of the time.
Sometimes, the plot just demands that you be somewhere. It's unclear how long it takes to get anywhere, or how much time hyperspace actually shaves off your trip. The movies never give clear indication of this unless it's needed to make a conflict, or solve one.
Do they need to? I mean, this problem is nothing that can't be solved by a swipe at it.
So how long was that?
I have no idea.
The inconsistency of travel time in Star Wars and the actual maneuvers of ships through space can sometimes lead to logistical questions. But in the case of Star Wars, simplicity usually wins the day, and it keeps the story moving for the sake of action-adventure.
Overall, we've got a lot of really neat stuff going on in the Star Wars universe, even if we sometimes have our misgivings about how it's used.
The best asset it has is definitely its variety, which we think is really important to world building. Even without much detail, the more variety you have in your world, the more your audience's imagination can run wild whilst immersed in that world.
And it's something that's really important to think about with Star Wars especially, because a lot of what we have of the Star Wars canon came from outside sources, not necessarily from Lucas himself.
Forgetting certain parts of world building or deciding not to include certain aspects is pretty normal for most world builders. There will always be things that can be improved upon or tweaked or generally thought out more than they already are.
And that's something we didn't really talk about in our Game of Thrones unit. More often than not, a world won't be thought out perfectly or completely, even if that's what we're striving to do.
The world of real life is so rich and complex and multifaceted, and so too should be the ones that we create.
Thanks for coming back for our second season. We are so excited to be back, and we're excited to see what you think about The Force Awakens, Star Wars, and world building.
To get you started, what do you think the Star Wars universe is? Is it purely a creation of George Lucas, or is it mostly a creation of its fans? Let us know in the comments below.
And don't forget to subscribe.
Or you can follow us on social media to find out what in the world we're going to talk about next.
Until next time, stay curious.
And stay creative! Hey.